why are we going to bother with declarations and preambles? The important part about declarations and preambles is they usually tell you something really important about the document that's going to follow. And you're going to be able to understand the document that follows much better if you start out understanding why they bothered. So, it also helps you to rebut later attempts to twist the meanings of what's been written. Because sometimes if you're just looking, if you take a little excerpt out of the middle of something, they can say, oh, it doesn't really mean that, it means this instead. It's like, no. Let's go back to the preamble. Let's go back to the start. The purpose for writing this was bumpity boom. Therefore, your interpretation cannot be correct because the purpose they wrote it for was different from what you are positing. So that's the whole purpose of studying declarations and preambles. Declarations, like the Declaration of Independence, like the Kentucky Resolutions, the Virginia Resolutions, and the preamble to the Constitution, preamble to the Bill of Rights, those are the mission statements for the documents that are following. And they're the principles, they're the statement of principles that are being built on. So let's look at the Declaration of Independence, the preamble here. The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which has connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government. So let's peel this apart. The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. Unanimous means they all agree, all 13 of them. Hard enough to do, right? We've talked before. How do you get 13 people to decide on toppings for 4 pizzas? It's really hard. 13 states, all the way from New Hampshire down to Georgia. You think they all had the same interests, the same concerns? No, but they were unanimous in this declaration. A declaration itself is a formal statement. They're serious about this. And the 13 states, even in the capitalization, United States, capitalized, 13 individual, independent states, uniting in order to act in concert in this matter, but retaining separate sovereignty. That's different from just declaring themselves to be a new country, although that was part of it. And you should think in your free time, how is this different from just forming a new country? Because that underpins much of what they put in the Constitution. So how is it different? Why is it different? Why'd they want it that way? What was the purpose? Think about it. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary. So they are putting their situation up against the entirety of human history to that date. Compare us with ancient Greece, compare us with ancient Rome, compare us with the Babylonian Empire, compare us with history. It becomes necessary. These guys were astoundingly learned and self-educated. They chose every word for a reason. They chose the grammar for a reason. This becomes necessary. This isn't a passive voice. They didn't get up one day and decide to be really, really ticked off with Britain and decide we're going to do something about this. No, this is passive. They have had this forced on them. We weren't looking for this. You forced us. It became necessary. It's no longer optional. There has been a connection to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another. The king abrogated those connections. This wasn't us. This was you. This is all on you. We are reacting. We have to. And to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. Natural law is the only reliable basis for real justice and a stable society. You can read that in William Blackstone's Commentaries on the Law, published in 1803. Earlier versions were widely available in the colonies. Remember, we talked about reading the law as a way to learn to be a lawyer. Blackstone's earlier commentaries and the separate pieces as opposed to the one big, huge, multi-volume set, that was some of the law that they were reading. So, what is natural law? For that, we have to go back to Cicero, who was a consul of the Roman Republic. He was a lawyer. He was a philosopher. He pushed hard against the decay of Rome from a republic to the empire, and he really understood the machinations of power. He was studied in Latin by all educated men in the late 1700s. From first principles, as any scientist will be able to tell you, derived from first principles, he deduced the existence of a supreme creator. Now, to him, this was, the originator of Rome's 17 gazillion and 3 gods. But he deduced the existence of a supreme creator. Once you admit that there is a supreme creator, it follows by inevitable concatenation that the only working approach to government and justice is to be in accord with the rules written by that creator into the very structure of the cosmos. And any other structure, any other type of creation, ultimately will fail. Because if you're going against the rules written into the structure of the universe, internal contradictions will eventually build up until that alternative structure implodes. So natural law is the only basis for a stable and just society. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. To impel is moral pressure to take action. It's another reference to natural law. And a respect to the opinions of mankind. That's not submission. It's not worry, it's not concern, it's not embarrassment, it's not fear of censure, fear of what other people will think, fear of getting unfriended on Facebook, fear of being called names, embarrassment at being right when everyone says you're wrong. No, but we will have respect. Not fear, not kowtowing, not bowing down to. And they embed a promise that they're going to give a list of all the causes for the separation, why they're just, why they have been forced to take this action. We hold these truths to be self-evident. So if we're going to restate this using some of the deeper terminology, what they pull in to these words that they chose. We, the committee, the Continental Congress, the elected leaders, the preachers, and the people of these 13 states, united in purpose, formally and legally assert and affirm that the following statements conform to the supreme reality of existence as established by God Himself. These statements, being self-evident, contain within them their own proof that all of humanity are created equal. Equal in rights, equal in treatment under the law. Whether you're a bum living under a bridge or a high-end banker with $7 million mansions scattered in various locations, the law should ignore all that and treat you the same. Equally made in God's image and equal in His eyes. That's what equal means. And that all of these people who are equal are endowed, that means gifted, by God Himself, not by a government, not an organization, not a document, not a set of documents. And if gifts are from God Himself, they are not subject to reverse, theft, overrule, exclusion, or even discussion by mere humans. They are not subject to revision, they are off limits. And the Almighty is not subject to editorial review by His creatures or by their structures, nor are His gifts. With certain unalienable rights. What's unalienable? People always stumble over this. Inseparable, inherent, built in, unalienable. So you can't mortgage them. You can't give them away. They can't be taken away. You can be tricked into relinquishing control over them, but you can't give them away. Rights are not privileges. Your rights are inherent. They cannot be removed. They cannot be limited. They are held at no expense or loss to any other person. Well, what does that mean? Healthcare is a right. No, it's not. Because in order to give you care, someone else incurs expense or loss, which may simply include loss of time. So it's not a right because it costs someone else a piece of their life to give it to you. And if you insist on taking it from them, you are enslaving them. People who insist that health care is a right believe in slavery. Your rights, since they are gifts from God, predate, transcend, and supersede the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and any man-made law. So let's step back and take a look at what Black's Law Dictionary says about rights. It calls them a power, faculty, or demand, inherent, again that built-in word, inherent in one person and incident upon another, or the powers of free action. They are not privileges. Privileges are a particular and peculiar benefit or advantage enjoyed by a person beyond the common advantages of other citizens. Privileges are granted. Privileges can be revoked. That is one reason, a huge reason, why the statists, the big government people, want to conflate, make you mix up and put together the concepts of rights and privileges. Because if they can trick you into thinking that your rights are actually privileges by calling privileges rights, since privileges can be revoked and taken away, then they'll try and take away your rights. They are different. If you ever want to, having a discussion over whether something's a right or a privilege, all rights start with property, starting with the first piece of property you own, which is your own body. So if there's a question if something is a right or a privilege, ask, who owns the property? You can apply that to healthcare. You own your body. It's your responsibility to take care of it. But do you own the medical school education? Do you own the laboratory equipment? Do you own the phlebotomist, the blood drawing nurse's life and time and expertise? You don't own those. So it's not a right. It's a privilege or a commodity, but it's not a right. Who owns the property? that among these what?
These unalienable rights.
Certain unalienable rights, that among these, not a complete list, but among these are life. Because if you don't have your life, you don't have anything, and there's no point in talking any farther. Your life is also a gift from God. Liberty. Liberty is the freedom to act without interference from the government or other individuals who claim power over you. And the pursuit of happiness. This isn't licensed to channel surf in your sweats with a clicker in one hand and a can of soda in the other. It's from Aristotle. Eudaimonia, meaning good spirit. The striving for excellence and the highest human good as the aim of practical philosophy. Pretty good for a pagan. He was a smart guy. A lot of the founders studied him in Greek. I had to look up Eudaimonia. All right, for ourselves, for our families, for society, and for the glory of God. That's the purpose of our lives. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Boom. There's the purpose of government. Secure these rights. The rights that our Creator endowed us, gifted us with. The purpose of government is to secure, which is to protect and defend and hold those rights inviolable, so that we can live our lives on our own terms, respecting the rights of others to do likewise. So how does the government secure our rights? Well, by restraining evil and wickedness. Evil seeks to take away God-given rights, frequently by deception, because it all comes from Satan, the great deceiver. It's for your own good. It'll make everyone safer. It's fair. It's only fair. You want to be fair, don't you? Evil seeks to take away our rights by deception. Evil men seek power over the lives of other people. And that evil can be internal or external to the country. And the proper methods to address it depend on the type. If it's external, you want to try your best to keep it out. You may have to fight it abroad. You may have to keep evil people from coming into your country. If you cannot control who comes in and out of your country, you don't have a country. You have a vestibule. If the evil is internal, that's the area where civil law acts. Deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. We tend to gloss over this just power. Yeah, they're just powers. Yeah, deriving their powers. No, deriving their just powers. Because you can derive power from many places. What are just powers? They're powers that actually work to secure the rights of the people. What's the purpose of government? To secure the rights of the people. So just powers work to secure the people's rights. They are powers that are specifically granted to that level of government by the people. There are powers at the federal level, powers at the state level, and powers at the local level. They are different. It's the state that regulates how often elevators have to be inspected. It's the local that decides whether or not you can put a bakery on this street with an apartment above it. It's the federal that deals with national threats. And they are powers that the people have actually consented to, not powers that have been grabbed. We'll just do this. We'll just make this regulation, and now you have to obey it. We're not supposed to be doing this, but if we can force you to do it, let's just go for it. No, those are not just powers. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government. But you got to take care. Later on it goes and says, accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. And part of that is because if you have a revolution to institute new government without God and without rock-solid principles behind you and have those widespread through the society, you end up with the French Revolution, Madame Guillotine. The Russian Revolution, 100 years of communist dictatorship. The Chinese Revolution, where they're still living under brutal rules. Although even there, not nearly as bad as North Korea. And where are today's Washington, Jefferson, Madison, Franklin? Where are they in public life? The rest of the Declaration of Independence goes on to enumerate, to list the violations of natural law on the part of George III and the British government, and also the attempts of the colonies to ask for redress in the years preceding. Every one of those violations is addressed in the Constitution. Plus, they also address the imperfections in the Articles of Confederation. So let's compare this a little bit with the Declaration of Independence with George Mason's Virginia Declaration of Rights that he wrote in June of 1776. All men are by nature equally free and independent and have certain inherent rights of which, when they enter into a state of society, they cannot by any compact deprive or divest their posterity. Who's their posterity? Namely, the enjoyment of life and liberty with the means of acquiring and possessing property and pursuing and obtaining happiness and safety. Remember again that all rights start with property, starting with the first piece of property you own, your own body. Property is defended in the Ten Commandments. Thou shalt not steal. If you don't have private property, there's nothing to steal. You have to have private property in order for there to be something to steal. So any form of government that says property will be held in common is anti-natural law, anti-biblical. I frankly don't understand how anyone who calls himself a Christian can be a socialist.
Say that louder.
I do not understand how anyone who calls themselves a Christian can be a socialist. Complete misunderstanding or deception in one area or the other. Either they're a socialist and not a Christian, or they're a Christian and not a socialist if they know what a socialist is.
Right.
So let's go on now to the preamble to the Constitution. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessing of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. We, the people. So who's in the position of power here? People. Do they relinquish that power in the document that's following? No, they do not. What's the position of the states? They are also parties to this compact. We, the people of the states, united. People and the states. Where's the federal government?
Nowhere.
Nowhere. Doesn't exist. Hasn't been created yet. The Constitution creates the federal government. Who's in charge? People and states. Federal government is their subordinate, their creature. There's principle in law that predates the signing of the Magna Carta in 1215, that the entity you create is never greater in legal standing than that which creates it. So if the people and the states created the federal government, they retain sovereignty. They grant the government privileges, not rights, privileges, in order to perform the duties that it has been assigned. Since the federal government is created by the Constitution, it has no legal standing to change the terms of its own existence. It can't just waltz in and say, we feel like doing this now. We're going to regulate CO2. We're going to regulate you being able to breathe. That's the basic bottom line of regulating CO2. We're going to regulate whether or not you are allowed to breathe. in order to form a more perfect union. More perfect. Not perfect, more perfect. So perfection, we always strive for perfection. We're never going to get there. So the people who castigate the United States because it doesn't live up to its own ideals, duh! Of course not. We're not perfect.
That's right.
We strive for it. We aim for it, knowing full well that we are going to fall flat on our faces. You can get up, wash your faces off, put a bandage on if we have got a bad scrape, and try again. And more perfect than the government that was under the Articles of Confederation, which was a perpetual union, was falling apart after less than 10 years because they were so terrified of a powerful central government. What had they just spent years fighting against? 1787 was only 3 years after the signing of the Treaty of Paris that ended the Revolutionary War. They're not going to create a powerful central government. And if you'd asked them if they were gonna, they would have said the equivalent of 1787. What are you, stupid? It's one of my grandmother's favorite phrases. What are you, stupid? Usually followed by boom up the side of the face. You got unstupid real fast around my grandmother. Insufficient power to act. They were so afraid of a strong central government, they gave the Articles of Confederation government so little power it couldn't act. Too stringent requirements for agreement. You had to be unanimous. Get 13 competing colonies states to agree on anything. Imagine trying to do it with 50. Oh, Hawaii and Alaska have a lot in common with Maine. Yes, no. So the new system that they're going to write has to address both of these issues, but they have to do it carefully. They have to give the new government enough power to act, but not so much power that it's going to turn to tyranny. The established justice, domestic tranquility, common defense, these are the civil purposes. You put these three together, you have a nice stable polity, and then people can build their lives. They know what's expected of them, they know where they can act, and they can just go ahead and build their lives and live those lives without interference from the federal government. Promote the general welfare. This one gets twisted all the time. But let's see what welfare means in Webster's 1828 dictionary. Exemption from misfortune, sickness, calamity, or evil. The enjoyment of health and the common blessings of life, prosperity, happiness applied to persons. Or the exemption from any unusual evil or calamity, enjoyment of peace and prosperity, or the ordinary blessing of society and civil government applied to the states. Does that say anything about EBT cards? Section 8 housing, Obama phones, free health care, free college tuition? No. The term public relief doesn't even enter dictionaries until 1969. That's the year we went to the moon. I was 11 years old. You do your own math. So this whole idea of welfare being public relief, and that's what they meant in 1787, does not even enter the dictionaries until I was in middle school. I'm not that old. All right, the Federalist Papers themselves, they refute any application to individuals. In Federalist 45, the 9th paragraph, the powers delegated to the federal government are few and defined and principally on external objects. That means outside the country. Government jurisdiction extends to certain enumerated, listed, numbered objects only. General welfare are items that are generally good for the entirety of the people, like post offices, post roads, ports, courts, patents on your inventions, uniform system of money, uniform system of weights and measures. If you're going to buy a pound of flour, you want to know that it weighs a pound and not 4 ounces. And secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, because this is the ultimate purpose of putting ourselves under government, is liberty for our lives. The ourselves was the framers' generation. Posterity, that's us. Me, you guys, the ones that are going to follow us. It's not free college tuition. It's not health insurance. It's not free phones. The people who want free stuff actually believe in slavery. If they demand it, it has to be provided, willingly or unwillingly. As soon as you say unwillingly, you got slaves. You may call them free, like the people in Denmark paying 80% taxes, and then with the 20% that's left, they get to pay the 25% sales tax. Unwillingly means slavery. And again here, they use the tactic of conflating rights and privileges, making you think that they're the same thing when they are not. Do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. This is like church language, right? You ordain a minister, you ordain a priest. To ordain is to enact, fix, or set in place, or set apart for a specific office, and it's got overtones of religious duty. They took this seriously, very seriously. Establishing is to set up and organize or to form something. So again, who are the parties to this compact? We the people and the states. Is the federal government a party to this compact? No, it is not. Preamble to the Bill of Rights. Most people don't realize there's a preamble to the Bill of Rights. The conventions of a number of the states having, at the time of their adopting the Constitution, expressed a desire, in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers, that further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added, and as extending the ground of public confidence in the government will best ensure the beneficent ends of its institution. So even before the Constitution was ratified, the people in the states were concerned about the new federal government outgrowing its limitations, so they were promised a set of clarifications and restrictions. You should read the anti-federalist papers sometimes. They're a little bit more emotional, they use more hyperbole in their language, but they listed very thoroughly every way in which the federal government was going to outgrow its britches. They were right. And the cause ultimately is us, because we fell asleep at the switch. Expressed a desire in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers. So can you put this any more clearly? We're worried the government's going to outgrow the limits we've set. To misconstrue is to interpret erroneously either words or things, and to abuse is to misuse, to use with bad motives or wrong purposes, to deceive, or to misapply. They want to prevent erroneous interpretations, deceptions, misapplications of the powers of the federal government. That further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added. So the entirety of the Bill of Rights is to ensure the federal government does not exceed its proper limits. To declare is to set forth and define. To restrict is to impose restraint. So the first 10 amendments are clarifications of or restrictions to, additional restrictions to, the lawful actions of the federal government. And as extending the ground of public confidence in the government will best ensure the beneficent ends of its institution. By adding these further limitations, the people should have greater confidence that the government will be properly restrained in its actions. That only works if we're paying attention. These restrictions will aid the federal government to do good and to help prevent it from doing evil in the name of good. Remember, United States is the only country ever founded on the principles that inherent sovereign rights come from God, that sovereign political power is vested in the people, and that the sole purpose of government is to protect and ensure that those God-given rights are held inviolate. So the initial sections of the Declaration of Independence, the preamble to the Constitution, and the preamble to the Bill of Rights, they're really critical adjuncts to understanding the documents themselves. You'll have a better understanding of what the provisions in those documents mean, what they stand for, when you study them, if you keep these principles in mind. And again, it'll help you fight back against misconstructions and abuses when you have the principles to show. And I'm actually done a couple minutes early. Questions?